up in the morning, beneath the stars so bright. Pull your hat down, make sure your cinch is tight. Horses kinda snuffy, cold chill up your spine. You'll get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight.
Howdy there, I'm Matt McKinley and we're burning daylight.
In the saddle till the job's done right.
Welcome to Burnin Daylight, the only podcast for the working cowboy. All right, welcome back, Daylight Burners. We got a good episode coming in today. We got a fella named Wyatt King. You may have seen him on if you're friends with pretty much any of the cowboys on Facebook, you're aware of this guy. He's a hell of a meme dude, and I really enjoy seeing him post stuff. He's from Utah somewhere. I think southern Utah, if I remember right. I'm trying to stall for time. He must have had to drop out, but anyway, he'll be back, I'm sure. And let's see. He'll be back here. There he is. Anyways, I think you'll like this guy a lot. Like I said, he posts a lot of good memes, and what I really appreciate about his memes is kind of the same way I appreciate the Babylon Bee. Like they're able to make a joke and kind of everyone appreciate it. They don't have to make they don't have to curse, they don't have to do anything outlandish. They just go for the joke, and Wyatt's kind of one of those guys. And anyways, like I said, I believe he's from southern Utah. But we'll let him introduce himself as soon as I can find my damn mouse here. There we are. So, anyways, welcome to the show, Wyatt King. All right, how's it going,
Hey, Matt,
man?
thanks for having me.
It's
going pretty good.
And I appreciate you coming on and taking time out of your day. I know you're kind of you're a busy man, going to school and raising a family and trying to. I assume your family has a ranch.
Believe it or not, the cowboy thing is just kind of from my dad, from his family.
Okay.
He just trail rides, and it was actually kind of by accident. He ended up picking up an old ranch horse out of Malad, Idaho. That's not too far away from where I grew up. I live in Tremont, and so that's on the north side of the state.
Oh, okay.
But the guy, he had roped bulls on this horse. He cowboyed on it every single day, and was kind of ready to kind of retire him, and wanted him to go to a good home. And that he ended up being the horse I learned to ride on, and I ended up getting involved with a 4-H group for working ranch horses, and we and all across the state they'd have little like ranch rodeos for the 4-H kids. We had one in Tremont, and there was one in Panguitch, and it was a kind of a fun little deal. So that's kind of where my little cowboying expertise comes from. I want to be better at it, but for right now, I'm just trying to get through school and trying to, survive the world, it feels like.
Yeah, that's kind of the challenge nowadays. But I like all of it. It's interesting when you enter the cowboy world, and it's insane how small it's got nowadays with the advent of social media and whatnot. But like cowboy world's always been kind of small, um, but also big at the same time. You know, like I grew up in Eastern Colorado, and like I didn't know that anybody still ran a wagon. Otherwise, I would have been out. I would have been on the wagon right out of high school. Um, but it just it's funny how, like I said, if you talk to any cowboy anywhere that's been around a little bit, they know people from all over the country and a lot of times all over the world.
Oh
But at the
yeah.
same time, they'll tell you about places that you've never heard of. Like have no idea what they're talking about. And so at the same time, like that the whole cowboy world's pretty small at the same time. Um but that I don't know, that's one of the beauties of social media is it's like it's funny how many guys you'll see tied hard doing buckaroo shit or some guy with a big long set of taps and a big fancy bridle bit that are just like, all right, it's time to tie on, and it's just cool seeing how all those worlds collide. And it's, I mean, there's a lot of headbutting, don't get me wrong, even with social media there's a lot of headbutting, but
Oh yeah.
it's pretty cool just seeing the good hands of both sides kind of stand out. And now you see just like the whole world is just like a hybrid cowboy. Like you don't have I mean, you have you're still
Oh yeah.
buckaroo only or puncher only type clicks, but more often than not, you see a guy that's either riding a swelled fork saddle with a long rope or riding riding a wade tree with a grazer bit tied on hard. And it's I don't know, you just see a lot more overlap nowadays, and I think that's great.
Oh yeah. I'm also on the board for the Utah Range Cow Horse, so that kind of throws in another little
Oh yeah.
niche into it because a lot of your a lot of your ranch cowboys kind of frown on your showmen, and then your showmen kind of look down their nose at the ranch cowboys, and I feel like I'm
Mm.
kind of a mix of the two. If you if
Yeah,
you
and
can't rope off your fraternity horse, then what's the point?
I know, and then you see guys like Cliff Shat that's riding English too, as well as cowboy and as good as anybody out there, and you're just like, well, maybe I need to get an English saddle someday and learn how to ride that damn thing too. Because if I'm gonna call myself handy, I guess probably better learn. Even if I don't respect the discipline, I probably better learn how to do it.
My Since you mentioned it, growing up, one of my best friends growing up, one of his he just seems to have a thing for finding oddball things to buy. And one day he
Mm,
bought an English saddle, and he put it on one of his mares, and it's a mare that I kind of had a love hate relationship with.
mm,
Whenever we'd go and ride at his house, she was good to rope off of. You could chase some of the cows that they had in their pasture on her and everything, and she wasn't too terrible. But when I hopped on her in this English saddle, I'm still trying to figure it out. And she slid to a stop, and I Supermaned it right across, and was a lawn dart.
that's funny. I
It
see
was
my
a
mom growing up. She had I guess just go do some cowboy shit on that English saddle, and I never I was either too cool or too chicken to try it. But I always had that idea, and and then now, like, now that I'm kind of, I don't know, it's kind of the same thing like I was in high school where or college both. It's like, man, if I would have actually paid attention and tried to learn some stuff, boy, I'd be a smart son of a bitch. But I was too young and dumb and focused on other things at the time. And if I would actually try to learn to ride that English saddle, like man, I'd be way stickier than I like I'm decently sticky, but man, I'd be a lot better because like that English style deal where you don't have anything in front of you. You don't have a horn. You don't have swells. You don't have squaw tits. Nothing. Just it just pretty well flat right in front of you. Like you better learn how to use your legs and your core and try to stay at top of that sucker because you have pretty much nothing to hold on to.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how Jim Craig and Man from Snowy River was able to survive that big old long jump all the
I
way
know
down there on that old dun.
it's funny. So I had a buddy listen to the podcast for a while and actually researched my dad when he was in college, but he's from West Virginia, Dan Gibbon. He came out and we had some drinks and talked well into the night. And he was talking about some of the terrain around there, and then I know that Tommy Gasell's just a little bit south of there, and he's talking about running hounds and stuff, and you're just like, man, that's pretty cool. And we kind of think of ourselves out west as the true horsemen of America, and I guess in the modern age we still kind of are, but like man, before the train got out to where we were, everybody rode a horse everywhere, and everybody was kind of halfway a horseman. And
Oh yeah.
there that shit goes back a long ways, and so like you have to kind of you have to just as much as we respect the vaquero tradition out here or the old time cowboys, like you got to respect those English hunter jumpers because they learned how to ride not to look pretty, but they made their horses look pretty to do a job. And
Yeah.
and so like it's a whole different thing. It's a different aspect of horsemanship that I never really came to respect until I got a little bit older and got a kind of looking at where all this stuff that we know and love, where it all came from, and you're just like, oh, most of this shit never had anything to do with a cow. Like that we adapted horsemanship to the cow.
Yeah.
And there's that aspect of horsemanship that goes way back before we domesticated cattle.
I mean, they talk about it in the documentary Down the Fence. I mean, you look at them guys that still practice it the way that they did hundreds of years ago.
Yeah,
They're not riding in saddles with horns or swells or anything. They're basically just English saddles, and they're riding around with a big ass stick to push them
yeah,
cattle around.
yeah. Well, and then you look at like the Argentine, the Gauchos. Uh, there is cowboys that come, but they don't have a set of swells. They don't have a horn. Everything's tied onto their cinch ring. And
Yeah.
if you talk to um JB Zilke with he's the guy that wrote the Last Cowboy, and he was talking about cowboying down there in Argentina. And I mean, we kind of turned down our nose at the trophy saddles and whatnot. We're like, man, down in Argentina, they might just throw a mattress and a ratchet strap on that horse, and you're
Yeah.
hooking you're hooking a Rieta onto that cinch ring, and you're like, well, you better know how to control that horse, or that Rieta's gone.
I don't know if you're part of the group, but it's like called Buckaroo Out West or something. And usually I don't know if you're familiar with Fred or Jan Buckmaster. Usually it's Jan
Yeah.
that's usually Jan is posting, all of the kind of oddball videos. And one of them,
Mm.
it looked like a young Mexican guy or something. His saddle horn wasn't big and fat like they normally are. It was probably 6, 7 inches tall, and it was really not that
Yeah, it was
wide of a
like a
horn. And
barrel horn almost.
yeah, and his rope wasn't even a rope. It was like mule tape or something that you would run for
Yeah.
like electrician stuff. And he's just, you know, just letting it slide around. And I don't know how much rope he had. It felt like he was going through it like crazy. And that video was probably a solid 15 seconds long.
Oh yeah, he had like 8 or 9 wraps on his horn, and you're just like, whew. Yeah, I guess he's gonna come to a stop, or that that knot's gonna come through the end of his hand and really make a dent in it. But yeah, he got it. He got that old steer shut down. Or was it a steer or a horse that he roped? I can't remember. But anyway, he got it shut down with not much rope left in his hand, and
And it
yeah, like
just kind of makes
15.
just kind of makes you wonder, just, like how long did it take for him to figure it out? We can do it with
Yeah.
60, we can do it with 60, 80 foot ropes, and having a little bit bigger horns in that. And he's, doing it that way. And it just kind of makes you wonder, like, what one would be more efficient. But I mean, our stuff's probably, how much is a good saddle anymore? 3,500 bucks for a basic rough out.
Oh, yeah.
And
Like
I'm,
if you
and
want
I'm,
something custom
and I'm,
made, at 3,500 is probably your base. Like they got Teskies and stuff. Tech, like a custom cactus ranch saddle, like ranch roper type saddle. I don't know, say 10 years ago, that would cost you like all the bells and whistles, about 2,500 bucks, and now that's like their base price.
yeah. And that guy just looked like he just, it looked like he just kind of pieced a saddle together and just kind of found what
Yeah.
he could. And I mean, it obviously was still efficient because it obviously worked, but it just kind of gives you a little bit more of an appreciation for the fact that your stuff's a lot more, I guess, well built and kind of, I don't know if battle tested is the right word, but
Yeah, I
something that works.
on that note, I was thinking about, and tell me what you think about this, because I was pondering on like the leather and the silver and saddle maker game is, like everybody charges a lot of money, and I'm not bitching about it, but at some point, like it's like shit's out of my price range.
Oh
And just
yeah.
like I'm gonna go looking for the Luke Lane or the cactus or something like that. Some of those more production made type saddles, because I can't afford the handmade stuff. And I get it. I'm not like I said, I'm not talking bad on anybody. It just, like it's out of my price range nowadays. And so I was kind of pondering on that. And from a business standpoint, like you either have to hire somebody so you can make your stuff faster, or you got to charge more for your stuff. And in that line of work, you almost just have to charge more for your stuff, because if you hire somebody, you have to hope they're the best apprentice you can find. Otherwise, the quality of your stuff's going to go downhill. I mean, that's just how it is. And it's nothing,
Oh yeah.
it's nothing against anybody, but just that's just the name of the game. And so, like, if you're going to continue to do all of it by yourself, you have to raise your prices. But then that price is like your main customer base out of your price range, and now you're looking at guys that are saving up for a long time, or they've got enough trading capital to built up to where they can either trade across for it with some bits, or sell some bits. And or you got to ride a couple more colts, and it just and like I said, it's nothing bad on anybody. It's just the name of the game.
Oh yeah.
And so it's one of those, like, it's kind of a quandary that a maker puts himself in. And because if you're not, if your name's not out there and you're not drawing those big name or those big dollar prices on your stuff, you're like, well, boy, things get real tough. And so then you're like, all right, so do I hire somebody to help me hammer out a couple of bits that look the same way, or do I put a guy on leather work, or do I can I write it out until my name's out there enough to where I can actually make a living at this type of deal? And it puts, it's the same way with riding colts. It's the same way with well, kind of anything in this world. Like it's, at the end of the day, it's kind of a mix of luck and hard work, but hard work a lot of times leads to good luck.
Oh yeah. If you're always
Um,
prepared for those kind of opportunities, when it does come
yep,
across your way, then it benefits you.
yeah, and then it's like it's funny, the older you get, and when you have kids, and somebody's like, well, it's easy enough to do this, and you're like, go live a little bit, buddy, and you'll find out how easy that is. It sounds real good on paper. It's a lot like communism. It sounds good on paper. You try to put it into real life, and you're like, oh, life gets in the way of a whole lot of shit. And
Oh yeah.
so it's kind of, like the cowboy game. It's a lot easier to do when you're single and don't have any real bills. But once a wife and kids come in the picture, it changes everything a whole bunch.
Oh yeah. And you got to either find a way to still make it work. You kind of gotta adapt it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I've been. That's my goal, is to try and still make a way that it'll still work. But that's where the schooling comes into play for me.
Yeah. So you're going back to, so how did your education path, how did that all line up? Like cuz you're still fairly young, but you're kind of an old man in college, right?
Yeah, I would definitely say that I'm an old man for college. Um, from about kindergarten to high school, I really just I wanted to ride the wagons. I wanted to ride the Bronchi Colts, and live the cowboy life. And well, anyway, well, I left on my mission for the church, and kind of about halfway
That's two
through, I
years,
kept.
right?
Yeah, that's 2 years, and right around the year mark, I kind of started to think a little bit about school, which I thought was kind of weird. But I ended up coming home, and then just kind of was just working at a feed store in town, trying to save up a little bit of money to go to school. And I had knocked out a little bit of my first year, but then I'd met my wife, and she was further along in school than I was. So I decided
Mm-hmm.
I'd work while she went to go to school, and we would kind of work out something for me later. And so by the time I finally got to come back, which would have been, let's see, a year ago, was my first semester back. And that's when everything went out of control. We found out that we were going to be having our first kid. And then life just in general, especially in this modern economy, is kind of forced us to kind of, adapt in other ways to. So it's been a little tough trying to work and do school and raise a family. But this, uh,
Yeah.
this, it just seems like it would be like the best way to try and figure out a way to still make a living in agriculture, because obviously we still need it.
Well,
So
and you made a good move by going to work and then going back to school. So how old are you?
I am 27.
27. So yeah, you're definitely old man in college. But that I've thought about this many a time, just just out riding pins or whatever. You know how the cowboy world gets, like it's pretty boring until it's not. And then there's like
Oh yeah.
from what I understand, it's a lot like soldiering. Just like when you do get into a firefight, that's all you talk about because nothing else happens. And that's kind of
Yeah.
how cowboying is. Like until there's a wreck or something like something needs to get done, there's just a whole lot of nothing that goes on. And
Yeah.
the feedlot's the same way, just opening and closing gates, and then occasionally you might have one that turns back on you, and you gotta blast them into a fence to turn them back or something like that. And you're like, but that's yeah. You talk about that one event for weeks because that's the only thing that ever happens. And but there's something about just doing the same job every day, all day, every day. Like it gives you a little bit of maturity, and then you come to I come to appreciate what I didn't pay attention to in college, and you're just like, shit. I wish I would have went to college when I was 25 and had a few years under my belt, and you're like, I might be a genius at this point if I would have went to college when I was 25. And so like I think you did it right there.
The originally, I was planning on uh, just cowboy, and then I came across, the kind of the desire to go back to school and then going back to work, it really ended up making me miss school because
Mm-hmm.
at least with you being able to kind of choose your major and everything, I mean, the university kind of forces you to take some classes you normally wouldn't take, but
Yeah.
for the most part, you can generally have classes that this is what interests me, this is what I would want to see where it could take me, and
Yeah.
in those first couple of years, I was working for a construction company. We would make the concrete and pour it into the mixers, and the mixers would take it out and everything. And you want to talk about a boring ass job, being a
Yeah.
laborer, waiting for the extra mud to come back to make some blocks. You'd be stuck there
Yeah.
for 2, 3, 4 hours just waiting for enough mud to accomplish that task before you could go do anything else. And
Yeah.
uh, and then I even for a little bit I got to be a tester for the concrete and got to test for the Kennecott mine down over there in just south of Salt Lake. It's a big giant copper mine, and
Mm-hmm.
they would need our concrete. Well, I'd get there at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I wouldn't leave until you know 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and you're not allowed to really leave your truck. So you're sitting at the bottom of a mine, a couple miles down below everything, just sitting there. So it gave me a
Jeez.
it gave me a lot of time to really miss school and be like, wow, what I could be doing with my life if I wasn't doing this.
I know it. And then you think there's probably guys that have been in that same position for decades. Just like that they've done that same job for 20, 30 years. And I don't know,
That's how all the
it's kind of
mixer
the
drivers were.
yeah. It's kind of the same way in the feedlot world, like the feed truck drivers and like the hospital guys or the mill guys. They've done that same job every day for 30, 40 years, and you're just like, ooh, I uh I don't know, that's the cowboy part of me, and it's like, man, I would have quit a long time ago. I did
Oh
a
yeah,
intern I did an internship for it was Beef Products International, and they were the company that got in all the trouble back in like 20, I don't know, like 2012 or something like that, for the lean, finely textured beef, the pink slime as they called it on the news. Like the plant that I worked at, I was quality assurance for that plant, and it gives you a whole, like, you see a whole different side of the world, and you're just like, man, they tell me this stuff is safe, but I'd rather I'd rather package my own beef and get it that way. I'm like, I'll eat it if I have to, but yeah, I don't know. you see them just like dumping ammonia on it, and you're like, I know that kills bacteria, but I don't know how good that is for a person.
Yeah.
And but then also you're like, there's a McDonald's everywhere, and our biggest customer was McDonald's, and you're like, so I mean, you want a cheap hamburger, this is the way to do it. And you're like,
Oh yeah.
it's still beef. I'm not sure if I agree with all the stuff they say is it makes it safe, but uh it's still better than that fake meat bullshit.
Oh yeah. I basically quit going to a lot of those fast food joints that offered it because I was like,
Mm-hmm.
eventually you're gonna you're gonna quit giving me the real beef and you're gonna give me
Yep.
that. And I was like, I ain't gonna run that risk. And I mean, McDonald's hasn't seemed to have fallen for that yet, but I don't know if they ever will. But they're big enough. I don't think anyone could just take them on and force them to do it.
No, but if you start looking to the some of the economics of it, like if you notice the Holstein steer is kind of almost extinct, and that's only happened in like the last 10 years or so. And they like all the dairymen for their terminal crosses, they go with this high-dollar beef semen, and they spit out a crossbred steer calf and or bull calf. And I mean, they feed pretty good. They grade excellent, and the packer doesn't have to deal with the cow man. They deal with the dairy guy who's in the same sort of business they are, and they kind of, maybe they don't see eye to eye, but they're a lot closer to eye level than your average rancher is to the big packer.
Yeah,
And if they get that little pipeline in, they're going to expand it. And if you look at the dairy world, it's highly subsidized, and there's no the one incentive for the dairyman is higher production. Like the quality, it'll pay a little bit more now that the millennials have the higher market share of it. But at the end of the day, the big packer's about production, the dairyman's about production. And this is the first time a dairy calf has been worth anything for pretty much ever. And yeah, so they have no incentive except to expand. You're gonna see, well, you've already seen an explosion of dairy products over the past 10 years. You're gonna continue to see that, and you're gonna see a whole lot more of those crossbred calves in the feedlots. And particularly with this drought, the dairymen can keep on producing, where your average cowman's got to cut back, if not sell out completely. And that's how the vertical integration of the beef industry is going to happen, is through the dairyman. It's not going to be through the rancher. They'll use the dairyman to elbow out the rancher.
yeah, and that's a damn shame.
It really is. But the cowman's got to get smarter. Like that's at the end of the day, we're kind of free market people, and I think the cowman's been slacking for a long time, or they've been resting on their laurels for far too long, and they got to get creative. And that's like, once again, that's not talking bad on anybody. That's just the name of the game. You want to stay in business. You can be mad at the packer all you want. You can be mad at the dairyman all you want, but the system is what it is, and their only incentive is higher production. So you got to get creative with the locally raised stuff somehow.
Yeah,
You
I
gotta you gotta create alternative markets or something.
I know that one of the big things going on right now is obviously just instead of going, through the store, going through the packers to get your beef, the recent
Yep.
thing, especially around northern Utah, is people want to buy directly
Mm-hmm.
from the rancher. And I kind of was advocating for that in one of my school papers. My she wasn't my professor. She was a graduate student, but I keep calling her my professor because, you know. It's
Yeah.
it's weird because she wanted us to call her instructor and then by her last name, and it just did not roll off the tongue very well. So I just always called
It's
her my
too wordy.
professor. Yeah, it was just too much, and then she had like a German last name, so it was just
Oh
really
yeah.
clunky. And
Instructor Schlegel Flopper.
yeah, and so it was just it was just weird a lot of times some of the conversations that I'd have with her because she was super straight laced and
Yeah.
and she gave us a project to work on for the end of the semester, and I was just kind of searching around, just like, okay, let's see what's a problem in agriculture that I can put my 2 cents in on or something. And I picked, the continuously dropping number of cattle in the United States, and I touched on beef cattle. And I mentioned that one of the big problems affecting it was the beef packer monopoly,
Yep.
and a lot of them they didn't realize that the price they're having to pay for steaks and burgers at the grocery store, they don't make any money off of the ranchers, don't make any of that money. It's the packers.
Yep.
They're starving out the ranchers and making their own money. And so it's
Well,
just,
and they're
and
starving out the small feeders too, is because the same way, like unless you have a formula contract with one of those big packers, you're you're fighting on the cash market, which is pretty much nothing, and the those big packers control the cash market too. So it's every now and then one of those packers will get a little wild because they're short on capacity or something, and they gotta make it up. So they'll pay a little extra for your live cattle, but for the most part, they work together and they don't even have to talk to each other. They've rigged the market enough, and it's one of those things where like we took way too much from Nazi Germany after World War II. With the ag sector, the pharmaceutical sector, everything's way too concentrated, and and like I mean, it's the same way with like in the Midwest, or particularly like where I grew up, where it's a lot like it's essentially a high desert with a tad bit more rainfall, not much. I think out here in Nevada, we're sitting at like 9 to 11 inches of precipitation a year, and where I grew up was 11 to 13 inches of precipitation. So I mean, you're very very similar. There's just no mountains around it. We're about a
yeah,
thousand foot lower, still very pretty high elevation. The lowest point in Colorado is still 3,600 feet, and so like we're high plains for sure. Um, and we don't get a whole lot of rain, and people are trying to farm out there. They're trying to farm like it's in Indiana, Illinois, and just like that. Iowa, it's not Iowa. It's we never learned our lesson from the Dust Bowl. We
no,
plowed up like 30 million acres of grassland, and as soon as that drought hit, oh boy, we made it worse on the ground. We made it a lot worse,
oh yeah,
and they're doing the same thing back there, but it's all from a subsidized commodity market, and like there's no differentiation in your grain. Like they'll dock you for sure, but you're not going to get any, particularly on your grain stuff. You're not really going to get any premium on your crop. You're just hoping not to get docked. Um, Cattle's a little different, but it's still a commodity market, and commodity meaning you know it's pretty much a blind product. Everything's kind of treated as the same.
yeah. I've been my major's in agribusiness, and I've been taking a lot of economics classes. And in fact, I was actually reading about some of it today for my assignment that's due later tonight. And it's learning how to get your fixed rate on your futures
Yeah.
markets. And
Mm-hmm.
it seems And it seems like since we're kind of trending in that direction, I mean, I'm not super uber duper familiar with it because, I mean, kind of based off my intro, I didn't have much of an interest in wanting to do anything that wasn't,
Yeah.
riding bronchi colts and throwing ropes and everything. So a lot of this is kind of new to me, especially coming from a family that, I mean, my grandfather was a farmer. He farmed
Yeah.
in a little community right there by Ogden, but I mean, he
That's
grew up in the
right in
time
the
of the
heart of
Depression
Mormon.
when they were still using draft horses. Yeah,
And
exactly. And and the and he had tractors by the time he finally got into his older age, but he still just used draft horses for everything. So it
yeah.
seemed like he was doing it for as more of a hobby than to make a living, but he was still making enough of a living that he could, kind of coast until
Yeah.
he finally died. And I mean, like my mom, she's awesome. She has her opinions on certain things, but uh, I still kind of feel like since I didn't grow up in an actual ranching farming family, I kind of feel like I'm kind of on the, I don't know, like the bottom end of everything, trying to figure out everything, but kind of
Oh.
learning more from these classes. It's been, it's actually been kind of cool to see how these markets work and what
Mm,
little tweak somewhere can completely make or break your operation somewhere else.
yeah. Because it's all so codependent on each other. Like the price of corn not only drives the cattle market, but it drives the hog market. And if the hog market's low, then you know you want a hot beef market, but you also don't want it to be too high because then people are going to turn to chicken, and chicken's always going to be the cheapest to produce. And like you want beef to be a staple, but also a higher price staple in the
Yeah.
American diet, and they've been able to walk that fine edge as a packer for a long time. Um, this Russia Ukraine deal really threw a wrench into everybody's. Like it's wild how something like that seems not at all connected to us has so many ripple effects downstream. That I mean, it turns out Russia is like the biggest supplier of nitrogen fertilizer, and it turns out we use a lot of that stuff, and we don't make it a whole lot anymore because of the global market. We can import it cheaper than we can make it, and and then we got this whole green revolution going on where people want us to change it completely how we grow our crops, but also it still takes some. It's making stuff, food, cars, all of that. Like it's a kind of an ugly business when you peel back the layers of that onion, and people don't want to look at it like that. They want to have their stuff and they want it to be green so they can feel good about it. But when you actually look at what's how all that stuff is made, I mean it's a pretty ugly business at times.
Oh yeah. I mean, like I was actually trying to think of some, like I wasn't sure where you wanted to go, like as far as
Yeah.
direction with this. And earlier today, I got to thinking about that where, like we're held to such a high standard when it comes
Yep.
to having to run green. And they don't think about the pollution from vehicles. They don't think about, you know,
Right.
the the environmental damage that it comes to make batteries, but they
Yep.
blame the world's problems on cow farts.
Yeah. Well,
You know,
and so take the ethanol thing. There's a mandate from the federal government that so much of corn production has to go into ethanol. That artificially inflates the price of corn, which therefore artificially inflates the price of chicken, beef, and pork, lamb, any of your livestock animals that eat corn. Uh, the price of that gets artificially inflated because the government says we have to save this much corn to make ethanol, which is an inferior fuel. Like it's a shitty fuel.
Oh yeah.
It burns more carbon, and then to put it in the ground and take it out of the ground, you're burning diesel the entire time.
Hmm.
There's no readily available biodiesel, like carbon friendly diesel. No, it's straight up diesel, and you're burning several gallons per acre to put it in the ground, spray it, cultivate it, dumping water on top of that. You're washing your pesticide, your herbicide off the crop with the water that you're pumping on it, leaching into the groundwater, causing cancers and who knows what else. The farmers don't want to admit that Roundup causes problems, but I think the evidence is pretty clear at this point that like Roundup's not good for you. Like it's an excellent
Yeah.
weed. It's a really excellent weed killer, but it's not good for you. It's not good for
Yeah.
human consumption. Um, but all of this is driven by government incentives. This is what happens when the government gets involved in the market, because all these little things that are good for you. It's cheap food is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. Even shitty cheap food is a good thing. Um, but it add all the downstream effects add up. Whether it's
Hmm.
leaching glyphosate into the groundwater, whether it's changing the entire diet of the American public to account for the higher levels of cereal grains that we're growing, the seed oils, all the stuff that's kind of almost become commonplace, known that that's not good for you. All the stuff that we grew up eating, we find out like, oh, that shit was poison for us.
Yeah.
Um, but that's all incentivized by the government in one way, shape, or form. Um, the problem is like how once you remove all those regulations, how do you keep people honest? And that, as we've learned, people are not very honest for the most part.
Yeah, it's true.
And
That's we covered that in one of my APEC classes where I mean, I'm not pro government by any stretch of the imagination, but my professor, he went over certain examples. Like there's a couple things that you can make do where you just get everyone to agree on it and just hope that everyone's honest and it works. And then
yeah,
other times you do the same thing and there's someone that's screwing everyone else over
yeah.
and they're reaping all the benefits, or so we were just going over different ways of doing it, and
Hmm.
and I'm
Well,
and
and
I always
then
try to.
what we learn as more stuff comes out, like the bigger the company is, the more pull they have with the government, and the more they can shift the game in their own direction.
Yeah.
So even though they're legal, air quotes, um, what they're doing ain't right, and we see, well, like we're coming up on that issue in the West with water here real quick. Like the water issue is about to get out of hand, and you can point at the corporations, you can point at the government, and everybody's right, because it's all a big just jumbled mess of big corporations and big government. And
Hmm.
well, guess what? Big corporations lobby big government, and they've got all those politicians in their back pocket. And and you look at all the politicians across the West, even the good ones. Like Orrin Hatch was a solid conservative for a long time, but then you look back into his business deals, and you're like, oh, that's why he voted on all this stuff. Like he
Hmm.
voted because it affected his pocket. Not did it help the people of Utah? Sometimes, most of the time not. But he
Yeah.
spun it a right way, where he was fighting back against the Democrats, so that's why he had to vote this way. And then, like, I don't know, the more you look into it, and you're like, all these people are the same. They're the same.
Hmm.
I They none of them care about you, and that's why you have to start at a smaller level, and hopefully the people you send down the line to represent you actually represent you. But more often than not, once they hit that swamp, it sucks them under pretty good.
Oh yeah, that's one of the other things that we'd been talking about in that class was just making sure that it was a kind of figuring out like who was a lobbyist for one thing or another,
Yeah.
and basically in the end, I just kind of chalked it up to it's a bunch of dishonest people with money that are swinging everything in their favor,
Mm,
and
right. That's exactly right.
especially when it came to our water. I mean, last
Yeah.
year we had a record year for snow. Um,
Yeah.
that same teacher that was teaching us all this, he was actually in charge for the state for like recording water, and he just worked at the university.
Oh,
And
there was a
he,
big push there in Utah for and a lot of the money came from out of state, but there was a big push to shut off alfalfa farms completely.
yeah, and
And
that was one of the things we talked about because 80% of our water goes towards agriculture.
right. And so
And
like if you look at from the lefties' point of view, like all right, they may have a point that we're pumping too much water on our alfalfa. Like they it's not out of the question that they're onto something there because just like every other industry, people take advantage of what they have, and in particularly in the West with prior appropriation water rights,
mhm,
like you're incentivized to use the same amount every year, whether you need it or not. And like it's common knowledge that people will sell off their water or they'll just dump it if they can't use it because water's uh pardon the language, but water's a fickle ass bitch because if
mhm,
you can use it, you want it, you want all of it you can get, and if you
mhm.
can't, you don't want any of it. And
Oh yeah.
it's water's very very fickle like that, and
Mhm,
uh and so they're like it's commonplace where guys just dump it out in the desert because they got nowhere to where else to go with it. But the way the water rights are appropriated, like they have to use it or it gets cut back the next year.
mhm.
And in that way, it's a lot like a federal budget. Like if you don't use all that money, well, you're gonna get cut back next year because we're obviously giving you too much money, and it's kind of the same issue. So like those lefties have a little bit of a point when they say we're using too much water, but then they say shut off the alfalfa farms all the way, and you're like, well, that's fucking retarded. Like
Yeah,
like you have no idea the downstream effects of that. Like
yeah.
that is retarded, and that doesn't just affect Utah. That affects like the entire region, if not the entire country, eventually.
We have some of the
And
finest alfalfa in the state for Utah.
yeah,
That's probably
it's
one of
it's a
our crown
it's a
achievements is
big
our
export.
alfalfa.
Yeah,
So,
it's a big export is alfalfa Utah and or Utah from alfalfa, and I mean, but it's just amazing how like they can't see beyond the like, oh, too much water, that's bad, shut it down. Like, oh, okay, you may have a point that we're using too much water, but learn how the water system works, and then also what's going to happen once you say no more alfalfa produced. Okay, we shut it down. Then what happens?
well, I can
Well,
tell you right now, even if you're not directly working with agriculture, how many people have horses that just
yeah.
that live in the city? Like all of a sudden,
Oh yeah.
there's no alfalfa. Like, what are you gonna do to feed your
Yeah,
horse?
you're going to be paying $150 for a small bale of alfalfa before you know it. And you're going to drive most of your cattle business out of Utah. Um, like people will make it work for a little while, but they're only going to put their cattle back in Utah when there's grass. And then you're going to drive the price of hay up in the surrounding states. Um And as that keeps going up, people are going to look further and further away for their feed. You see this with all the droughts. When the hay crop ain't worth a shit in Nevada, then you got to look California, Oregon, Idaho. It's not good there, then you got to keep looking further out and further out, and then that drives the price of hay up here locally because people are like, well, fuck, I'll instead of $5 a bale, I'll pay $8 a bale because I don't want to have it hauled in for $12 a bale. And
Yeah.
it's all basic economics. And so, like, all right, these lefties started with a decent point, but their conclusion is retarded, just
Hmm.
retarded. And
Just
so you're like, all right, let's go back to your original point and let's see how we can fix the water issue and try to avoid shutting off alfalfa production. Like that's the goal.
making it more
Is
drought resistant would be, to me, would be the most
right,
ideal choice. Maybe not
right,
water it quite as much, make it kind of adapt, but just simply shutting off water to all of that. What are they going to do with the water? Are they going
right.
to leave their tub
Yeah,
on all
that's
night?
another issue they don't think of. That's another thing they don't think of. Like the cows fart too much. All right, well, let's get rid of all the cows. And say it takes 3 years, but we liquidate the entire herd. Then what?
Well, then that
Um,
everything's still going to be worse because they're still living in their own little world, thinking that everything's fine.
yeah, there for a minute, you're gonna get beef for pennies on the dollar until it runs out, and then it's gonna be a scarce commodity, and the only beef you're gonna get is from like those rancid ass wild cattle that they have to go catch in Arizona and New Mexico and southern Utah.
Hmm.
And I mean, it's gonna be like venison except more expensive.
Hmm.
And then okay, so then you have all this grass that nothing's grazing. Well, we've seen how that works in California. Shit just catches on fire
Yeah.
all the time.
and
And then yeah, then
even
you got
even
all
with
the
us
water.
grazing even with us grazing up in northern Utah, we lost a whole bunch of rangeland to some. It was some negligence the first time it came around.
Yeah.
um they ended up lighting up the whole mountainside on fire, and they lost thousands of acres
Mm-hmm.
of prime rangeland. And then the next year, the same people were doing their own little controlled burn, and it got out of hand and burnt the exact same thing all over again.
Yep.
you know even
And
even with it being grazed, it can still, if you put it in the right
what
situation, it'll still burn.
you look at like the major fires, like the California fire like a couple of years ago, um, this fire down in Texas just here within the last month, and there was another big one. It's all started by power companies, transformer shorting out or something. And you're like, I mean, shit happens, but also then they do an investigation on it. And you're like, oh, like the power pole in Texas hadn't been checked, like physically checked since the 60s or something like that. And you're like, well, okay, how do you fix that? Like you get better people to work for you, but people get complacent, and like and shit happens like that. But I mean, it's but that just gets worse when you don't graze it. Like that's the
Yeah.
biggest part of like my buddy Clint's place. They had to replace 40 miles of fence, and that was all started from a transformer, and it was fueled by CRP, which is stuff that the government pays you not to graze, not to plant. You plant it back to native grass, and then you just let it sit and collect a payment on it. And you're like, well, that's a tinderbox waiting to happen.
Hmm.
And we've seen plenty of cases of that. And you're just like, well, while I agree it's a good thing to put it back to native grass, but it's not good to just let it sit and fester for
Yeah.
years on
you
end.
you want it to get back to kind of how it was, but then you want to go right back to, kind of keeping it back down
Yeah.
so it doesn't turn into that.
Right. Well, and if you look how it was done historically, the buffalo came through here and they chewed it down, and as the grass got short, they moved farther north, and then they'd when the winter got bad, they'd turn back south, and they'd hole up for a little bit, and then they just work back south and raise it as they went. And it was like it was a semi it was like a naturally controlled deal, and probably not so much naturally now that the more we know about the natives, like the natives had a big hand in steering them where they went. And but there was a good reason why nobody lived out there. Even the Indians didn't really live out on the plains.
Yeah,
And then the government comes in.
they just followed them everywhere, you know, just they just
Yeah.
followed the buffalo wherever they went. No
Yeah.
one just lived
uh
there.
yeah, followed them or pushed them, but either way they're like, this place is good for 3 months out of the year or whatever, and then it's time to move on. And then there was a big push to settle the Great Plains, and so they passed the Homestead Act, and I mean it worked. People went out there and they stayed, but boy, it's been, you find out, you grow up on the high plains, you realize it's pretty goddamn hard place to live. And it's the same way with Utah, most of the West. I'm like, it's not an easy place to live.
No.
And then you see these like mega cities popping up around like Vegas and Phoenix, where there people weren't supposed to live there in the first place, and now you got millions of people living there, and well, we're gonna run into some problems there. And
Yeah.
it ain't the agriculture man's fault at that point. You're like, take a look at this little oasis that you built in the middle of the desert. Like that's probably not supposed to be there.
Yeah. And
I
then
don't know.
since
It's
and then since you mentioned, you know, just how inhospitable like Utah was, the joke is that when Brigham Young and the pioneers came over the mountain and they found where Salt Lake was supposed to be, you know, Brigham Young had a vision of everything and said this is the place. Well, the joke was is that he didn't say this was the place. He went, "This is the place." Like you know, like because it was just so inhospitable and everything. And I
oh
mean,
yeah.
they turned it into something which you know was pretty cool, but you know,
It's it really
it did
says
look
something for those early Mormons, because they yeah, they turned a wasteland in. I mean, it was the fastest growing city in America for a while.
it's still growing pretty fast. When I was working that construction job, um, like just for the concrete alone out of the plant that I was working at where I was testing, we were putting
Mm-hmm.
out, you know, 1,500 to 1,600 yards of concrete a day easy. And it was
Yeah.
going towards, you know, big industrial places like Facebook was building a big old thing out
Mm.
there, a Lifetime, you know, like they build like coolers and tables and stuff. They were putting in a big old warehouse and stuff. And, you know,
There's
then
a
they're,
huge data center out there in Utah for that the government owns too, and like Utah's
yeah,
another one of those states where the government owns most of the land. It's not as high as Nevada, but it's the second highest. And yeah, so like there's all sorts of weird shit that happens when the government owns land.
oh, yeah. And just, you know, just we've turned it from being I mean, when you look out where Saratoga Springs is, like that's kind of a newer place
Mm,
compared to, you know, where to everything else. It's right there by Lehigh. And if you've ever seen Footloose, when you're first, you know, the opening scene of the original Footloose, you see a grain mill. There's nothing
yeah,
around it. You drive past there now, and it sticks out like a sore thumb. Everything is city, 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 and there's just this random grain place
yeah.
there. And so, you know, like Saratoga Springs wasn't even a thought when that was around. And I would drive out there, you know, to test concrete and everything. And I would watch land that looked like perfect grazing land over the course of a couple of months turn into subdivisions,
Oh yeah,
you
because
know.
they get gobbled up, and then you
And so like
see.
it's cool
Go
how we
ahead.
turned it it's cool how we turned nothing into something, But when the nothing carries so much more value than the something,
Yeah.
I just kind of it just kind of felt like a shame that we were going through and just building all of these houses left and right, and in these big
Yeah.
buildings, and I'm just like, this should still be, rangeland.
See that
So
I had that history professor on here a while back, and he's a Chicago guy. Like he's kind of a well-known, Chicago specific historian. And he was talking about when the Union Stockyards shut down there in Chicago, and he's like, that was kind of one of the last links of urban and rural America. And once that link was severed, just like there was no reason for the ag man to go into the city. There was no relationship built from having to stay a couple nights in the city to sell your cattle, wait on your cattle to sell. Where before, you know you'd go spend a night in the stockyards, hang out at some of those, just rough ass local bars. Kind of, they're all based on a different ethnic identity, whether it's Polish or black or Irish Catholic or whatever. But you go to those little bars and taverns, and the bumpkin goes to town, and you make friends, and then you might make a good friend, and somebody comes out and visits you out in the sticks once a year when they get their vacation or whatever. And now that's all gone for the most part, and so you have a few lingering links between the urban and rural, but not many. And I think he had a good point on that. Now where you see it now is like that link between urban and rural is still there, but it's way different because it's a lot of the rural kids going off to school and then never coming back home. And
yeah,
so while the link is still kind of there, it's not a direct link,
yeah.
quite as much anymore.
I can't tell you how many people, like, especially in my part of the state, there's a big old stretch of land called Park Valley. I don't know how familiar you are with that or not,
I've heard of
but
it, yeah.
that's a big time ranching community. Basically, everyone is a rancher, and I can't tell
Mm-hmm.
you how many people that they came to come live in town, or they went to go live somewhere else, and they said, "Oh yeah, I grew up in Park Valley, but then I moved to the city and just never went back." And
Yeah.
to me that's a shame, because
Mm-hmm.
there's not very many people wanting to step up and take over these ranches. And
Yep.
and when there is someone with especially with the new push to to keep building houses, and especially here in my part of the country, your land developers are gonna they'll give you a couple $1 million for you know 10 or 15 acres.
Yeah.
And someone that's wanting to continue the traditions of ranching or farming, they might not have that much. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, if you're out to take care of your own ends, you're going to sell out to the developer rather than
Yep.
take the huge pay cut. And so it's just one of those
Well,
things
and
that.
a lot of those guys are end up over their head in debt anyways to the bank. So as much as they'd like to leave something to their kids, that they literally can't. Like the bank's going to get it one way or the other. So at least that's the way they can come out a little bit ahead. And
We're
and
running into that with some of that ground that my grandpa had down there in
mm,
Hooper. There's another city out there. They're wanting to annex part of the town for their own purpose. And
yep.
the ground that my mom inherited from my grandpa is in there, and they've been threatening to just condemn the acreage, and just
Mm,
kind of just take it for their own use. So they're kind of trying to pressure everyone there with farmland into selling out, or just simply just having it all being taken away just because they don't want to sell out. So it just kind of feels like, especially right through there, that it's a war on agriculture.
And like the developers and whatnot, they don't see it that way, but that really is what it is. And I guess at some point you gotta have some place for people to live, but it's we also got to feed them too, and
Mm-hmm.
the more acres that get developed for housing, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing necessarily, but that's the less acres we gotta run cattle or grow corn or wheat, and that's really where the like the urban rural struggle hits is like, well, you want us to do better, but you're taking away all of our land, and
Mm-hmm.
and
We're
either you outbid us or you just push us off completely. Um,
we're feeding the
and
entire world on, ever
yeah,
increasingly declining acreage.
mm-hmm,
And somehow we're able to do it year after year. But one of the things that I don't remember quite where I saw it, but the school I go to, Utah State University, they had like an ad where they was trying to obviously bring people in, especially for their ag program. But
mm-hmm.
one of the things they was highlighting, they're looking at seeing what it would take to be able to grow crops in space.
Oh shit,
And
yeah,
you're sitting there thinking, well, that's kind of an asinine idea, like how are you going to make that work? But
yeah,
when you think about it, at the rate we're going, we're not going to have any more ground down here to do that kind of thing with.
right,
So we're having to look, into outer space to still try and feed the world.
yeah.
I don't
Well,
I
because
don't know I
if
don't know how far along into the research they are, but they've been, doing that little they've been doing that from my understanding for quite some time, and it's because they're scared of, us not being
mm-hmm.
able to continue to feed everybody with what little we have left.
It's see, and that goes back to like the lefties may have a point at some on some things, and like there's a lot of people who's like, hey, we got too many people and we gotta reduce our carbon footprint, whatever. And you can, yeah, it's hard to it's really easy to just get caught up in all those buzzwords and tune it off. But like if you look at it, like, well, they're saying the earth's at like 8 billion people, a little over 8 billion people right now, and India is supposed to surpass China within the next decade, and we're going to be looking at like 9-10 billion people on Earth, within our lifetime, and you're just like, that's like another 1 or 2 billion people that we got to contend with, and it's not all going to happen in China and India. Like there's like we still have. I think we're not on the decline as far as birth rate goes here in the U.S., but like we're getting real close. But even so, we're like there's a lot of people that we're gonna have to feed, and people take up room, and that's just
Mm-hmm.
how it is. And yeah, so with that comes, they're gonna take more of our land. More of our people are gonna sell off that land because it makes sense for them. Without looking down the road, we have this whole government incentive agriculture program, which incentivizes you to produce more, which not necessarily a bad thing because smart people realize we're going to have to feed a whole lot more people in the future. So we got to figure out how to do it better. With that comes some drawbacks, like Roundup glyphosate is like I said, it's an excellent weed killer. Makes farming a lot easier. You can grow a lot more, but with that comes increased cancer rates, and now we're poisoning the water supply. And but if you decrease the production, it raises the prices. It's going to drive a lot of the small time farmers out of business. It's going to drive a lot of your small time ranchers out of business because of feed prices and whatnot. In the meanwhile, they're going to keep gobbling up more land. So you got to make do with less. And then you get into like the genetically modified animals, and you're like, well, that's a whole can of worms that we don't know yet.
Oh yeah,
And
the GMO craze.
yeah. And, like I was one of those guys that we used to spout off like GMOs are 100% safe. And, you know, all these wackos arguing against it are just that, they're wackos. And I'm not saying that they're not, because there's a lot of wackos arguing against it, but looking back on it, I never read a single one of those research papers that said it was safe, and I don't know. So I'm up in the air for it now. You're like and you
I,
look at how those big corporations work, and you're like, they might be right. I don't know. I'm not saying they're right, but I'm not saying they're wrong anymore.
yeah, and to me, there's a difference between like what the big companies are doing
Mm-hmm.
and GMOs, because
Yeah.
you know a genetically modified organism. How did we get dogs? They came from wolves. That's a
Right.
GMO.
Yeah.
That wasn't a bad thing. We
Yeah.
ended up
But
we
we're not
domestic.
talking about selective breeding anymore. We're talking about
Yeah,
inserting genes into a an object that doesn't exist yet. We're we're
yeah,
we're we're talking like kind
and
of playing
that's
God type stuff, and you're like, maybe it's safe, but they tell me it's safe. I don't know
and
anymore. Like, particularly after the COVID stuff, you're like, I don't know who to trust anymore. I
yeah, I ran
I
into
don't
that
know.
same thing.
And it kind of just comes back to like, well, I know, like the whole anti meat craze that they had for a while, particularly red meat. And it's like, well, I know my ancestors ate venison and beef and lamb, and they've done it for thousands of years
Hmm.
on record. And so, like, I know that's not going to kill me. Like, they can tell
Yeah,
me it's bad for me all they want, but I know, like, if my ancestors, and like that was the top of their diet, all right, so it's probably good for me. All
hmm,
the grain that my ancestors ate growing up, I know that's part's good. The GMO stuff, is it good? I don't really know. Like all this gene edited stuff, it's up for debate. Used to, I'd say it was safe. Anymore, I don't really know. I'm on the side of the agriculture man, but also I'm open to discussion, if because it seems like it might be bad. And
yeah,
particularly like on the insecticide pesticide stuff, like those organic guys seem like they had a real point. And we might not just dismiss them as hippies anymore. Like maybe we ought to listen to them.
yeah.
Not saying we got to follow them to their end goal, which is get rid of animal agriculture. I don't think that's a good thing.
No,
But we might ought to hear what they're saying about it being bad for us. Particularly on the chemical side of things.
yeah. The Since you mentioned the gene editing, in one of my economics classes, since it's geared right towards agribusiness and
Mm-hmm.
reading markets and everything, one of the things they talked about, they make us sign up for the Wall Street Journal, and because they
Mm-hmm.
find a lot of videos on there. Well, it's a rather touchy subject, but they gene edited a Angus cow down in Brazil to help it not sweat, to help it be more of an actual like
I
warm climate cow.
I heard about that. Yeah.
And some people, they were, just like you said, some people are like, we're not God, we're not, we shouldn't be messing with this. But on the other end of the spectrum, you also have to look at it and be like, well, if they turn around and do that, you can raise those cattle damn near anywhere.
Well, it's
You
the
don't.
same thing with insulin. They did, it was kind of an accident with cattle the other day, but they found out that they can produce insulin through the milk, through some sort of gene insertion thing. And they're saying that ideally they can produce enough insulin to supply the whole world with a herd of 100 cows. And you're like, well, if that's true, that's insane. That's awesome. Now, how
And
safe is it? Like is this
yeah,
something that we need to look into, or it's kind of like the
that's all. To
oh
me, that's all something that time will have to tell.
right, which was the whole argument behind the COVID vaccine is like that was the worst part of it for me is like they may have found something truly revolutionary and now we'll never know because it's become such a political issue and this is one of Trump's big drawbacks. He was the guy that pushed it through and you're like, well, you can't just push something through like that. You have to make them test it and prove it and it turns out like maybe that we were sold a line of bullshit on that and if we would have followed the regular procedures we would have found that out and that vaccine would have never came to market.
Yeah,
um, and in the meantime, I won't say for sure, but it sure looks like they suppressed all the treatment stuff, which was a big hurdle for them because if there was no known treatment, then they couldn't get the emergency use authorization on it.
yeah,
And so you're just like, oh, okay, so who made money off it? Then you look and see who made money off it, and you're like, oh, all these people in charge that were telling us that we are crazy for forgetting how vaccines worked. Like
yeah,
particularly us in the livestock world, like we know quite a little bit more about most vaccines than the average public because we use them all the damn time. And
yeah.
you're like,
Especially ivermectin.
yeah, well, and just vaccines in general, like it's a pretty like we're pretty well versed in all that. And you're like, oh, so like we know that a vaccine's not going to inoculate everything. Like there's some animals that's not going to react to it the way it's supposed to. But you reach herd immunity, which is a certain percentage of your herd that is going to be immune to that disease, and that helps you get over the hump of that death loss percentage. And I mean, it's well known within the agricultural world. And then they're telling us like, no, herd immunity means everybody, and we're like, well, that's not what it meant last year.
Yeah,
6 months ago, that's not what that meant. And now you're moving the goalpost on us, and I don't know that like I think that was the main reason why a lot of the rural community was like, wait a minute, and
yeah,
particularly like you're a little bit younger than me, but like your age, my age, and then like say up to like 45, 50ish when a lot of agricultural people started going to college and they learned this stuff. We're all saying like, well, what you're telling us is not what we learned about it in college. This is not what we learned, and we paid good money to get this education, and it's been pretty well accepted up until just here recently when you change the definition of shit. And
yeah,
um and so like I don't know. That was why I was skeptical and like from what I've gathered throughout this whole deal is like a lot of particularly livestock producers were so skeptical of that deal because we were like, that's not what I know. And I know vaccines.
yeah,
It's kind of one of those things where we're kind of in a niche community where like we actually do know quite a little bit about that. Like we may not know general medicine or whatever, but vaccines are pretty commonplace around here, and most everybody kind of has a general idea of how they work. And what you're telling us doesn't jive with what we know.
yeah. I mean, especially like when they did the whole 2 weeks to slow the
Mm-hmm.
spread. To me, that did more damage to hurt everybody than it did
Mm-hmm.
good because like I never got the jab. I ended up catching it in 2021, and I mean it was a sucky ass experience.
Yeah.
I couldn't keep anything down. I was constantly dry heaving or throwing up bile, and then at one point my temperature got so low that I turned dark purple.
Oh
It
no
it
shit.
scared it scared the shit out of my wife, and she threw me in a hot shower to kind of get my temperature back up. But
Huh.
I mean, even despite how horrible I felt, for 2 weeks, I still wouldn't change the way I did it because
Yeah.
I still got everything that I needed, and I didn't
Yep.
have to deal with the sketchiness of the vaccine that suddenly just appeared out of nowhere and was being, you know, get the jab or you lose your job, or get the jab, with all those threats. And I was like, I got the exact same thing everyone else did,
Mm-hmm.
and I turned out so much better.
Right. Well, and that's also one of the things that we learn in animal science, particularly at the collegiate level, is natural immunity. That there's certain animals that when they get sick, they'll get over it. Um, Good chance they're gonna have, if they come back healthy and strong, and it doesn't really diminish their health, they're going to be way more resistant to that bug the next time around. But there's also the people that didn't come about, or the animals that didn't come out of it very well, and those are the ones that we call junkers, chronics, railers, whatever you want to call them, and that's typically because we didn't catch it in time. Um, but there's I don't know, you learn a lot about biology working with livestock,
Hmm.
particularly with large numbers of it. Like you start to learn a lot, and you also realize that, like, our even though the cow has four stomachs, their body operates a lot like ours does. I mean,
Hmm.
it's their diet's completely different, but how, like, the internal mechanics are roughly the same,
Hmm.
and so, like, I don't know. And coming from a feedlot, and back in the day, really big feedlots where I saw, I guarantee you I'm in the top 5% of cattle viewed on Earth, at any given time. Um, you just you see a little bit of everything, and you just realize, like, our system's a lot like that, and so you can kind of almost self-diagnose. It's like going on WebMD without freaking yourself out.
Oh, yeah.
and
Just getting the casket
and
now.
yeah, exactly. But you don't know, you see, you're like, oh, I remember that steer over there the other day that, he was running snot out his nose, but it wasn't like the thick white ropes of snot. It was just like runny clear stuff, and he temped like a 107 or something like that. Then you got the same thing going on. You take your temperature and you're running like 103 fever, and you're like, oh yeah, we got some sort. It may be respiratory, I don't know, but I know my body's running a fever, so it's fighting something off. And I don't know, you pick up little stuff, and we're just not that much different from a cow at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Our brain works a lot different, but like I said, the internal biology of how the body works is, I mean, it's pretty dang identical.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure our fight or flight response is, probably geared more towards fighting than fleeing. But
Yeah,
I mean, still,
unless you
it
deal
would
with those
it
old
makes a
Bramer
lot more.
cows,
Oh yeah.
they got a pretty strong fight instinct to them. But yeah, it's like our brain works completely different. How we operate as a creature is completely different than a cow, but like the internal workings are pretty dang similar.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's wild, but um I don't know. Just the bigger the world gets and the easier life gets, the further removed people get away from dealing with livestock, or just even plant biology as a whole, and they just it's hard to fault them because they have no idea what we're talking about, what we deal with, and we're not the best messengers either of trying to explain what the hell we're doing out here either. We've been
I mean,
burned too many times.
a lot of us, like you said, we've been burned too many times, and then a lot of times it's the solitude that makes us
Yep.
enjoy it. So it's a
Yeah.
lot of times it is hard to, you know, to to put that message out there, and that's that's something that I've noticed, especially in recent times, like with Dale Brisby. He got that Netflix show, How to Be a
Mm-hmm.
Cowboy, and he has quite the social media presence.
Yep.
He, I mean, he'll act like a dumbass, but he still does a very good job at explaining, hey, this is where the beef that you get from the supermarket comes from,
Well,
and then trying to
same.
make that connection for everybody.
It's same way with Yellowstone. Like there is it accurate? No, it's not. And if you work cattle ever in your life, you're just like just you get like an autistic tick every time you see something go wrong that's not supposed to. But at the same time, it's also a really good show, and a lot of people watch it, and there's a lot more people that have an appreciation for what we do because of it, even though it's not you know as accurate as it should be. But
Yeah,
also, I mean, you kind of got to take the good with the bad on that, and like I've said it before, but like it made Cowboy cool again. There for a
yeah.
while, like Cowboys kind of somewhat disappeared, and then Yellowstone popped up, and now everybody's got a pair of boots and janky ass straw hat. But hey,
They all look like Jimmy.
yeah, exactly. But maybe 1 out of 100 of those kids that bought a new hat might make a hand one of these days, and
Yeah.
where it's kind of the constant struggle throughout time that like it's good help's hard to find, and I
Mm-hmm.
think it always has been and always will be, but it's going to take like the way the ag community or the rural community is going, it's going to take an influx of some city kids to fill that gap at some point, and it always has. That's the thing is we always think it's been a it's in your blood, and maybe it is, but it not necessarily because you grew up around it. It's just there like a lot of the good old time cowboys came out of the city too,
Oh yeah.
and so it just I don't
I
know.
mean,
It's a oh
look at how
I was
many
gonna
of
say
the
it's a gift and a curse at the same time.
yeah, and then look at how many of your pro rodeo cowboys came from somewhere city,
Mm,
and they were able to, like Charlie Sampson, Fred Whitfield,
yep.
how many, they, I don't know exactly how they necessarily got involved with the cowboy lifestyle, but you know, they went on to win world championships
Yeah.
in rodeo, and they continue to advocate for
Yep.
the cowboy lifestyle. So it's yeah.
Yeah, like you'll get some characters that you don't particularly like, but most of them ain't gonna make it anyways. I mean, it's kind of like anything throughout life. There's like most stuff is kind of hard. I mean, for us sitting in the cubicle is gonna be pretty goddamn tough, and uh, and so it just depends on how you how you value hard. But like I don't know, I saw it in what helping with my kids wrestling coach this year. Like we started with a whole bunch of them, and as the season went on and stuff got tougher, they dropped on out, and that's how it is with everything. And but you get pared down to a group of people that actually want to be there, want to learn, and well, those kids turned out to be really later down the line turned out to be really salty wrestlers, and that's good. And it's
and
not
that
for
and
everybody.
that's what I loved about wrestling was is that you find out more about yourself
Mm-hmm.
when because like like with a football team or a basketball team, like yeah, you're having to do a particular job against somebody, but should you fail, someone could at least step in and kind of cover up your mistake a little.
Yep.
Whereas wrestling, it's it's you and your opponent. You got to
Yeah.
find that dog inside of you.
Yeah, it's the ultimate individual, and that's what I really like about baseball because it's a good blend of individual and team sport. But yeah, you're 100% right with, and I told my kids I was like, you're not going to be very good because you just started. You don't know a whole lot, and I don't know enough to really make you good. But we go to practice, keep practicing, repetition, just and I said the cool thing about wrestling is when you win, it's awesome. But it
Mm-hmm.
sure sucks for the person that lost. And it sucks more than losing a football game. It sucks more than losing a basketball game. It just, because there's no, like every now and then, maybe you can blame the ref, but for 99.999% of the time, it's you and you know it.
Mm-hmm. And
Because,
that's the most frustrating part is because you can usually link it back to where you cut a corner
yep,
or you
exactly.
decide or
Yeah,
you decided, you know what, I don't need to run as hard as I did yesterday at practice,
yeah.
or something. It's you can always figure out where you went wrong, and that's what makes the defeat hurt even more.
Yeah, there was my daughter went to her first tournament this year, and there was one match where I mean, she didn't win, but she dominated that entire match. But that she let that girl up one too many times, and and the whole time was like she just got fixated on that girl's head. She was grabbing the head and she was gonna muscle her down, and never once shot for the legs. The legs were open the entire time and never once tried to take her down that way. And I told her it's like you should have won. You should have won, but you didn't because you lost your head. You got frustrated. You got mad, and you just grabbed whatever is in front of you instead of taking what they give you. Like she
Mm-hmm.
was just determined to grab that head and do like a head and arm takedown instead of just like if she would have shot one double leg, like she'd have been on top and would have just she wouldn't even had to got any back points. She could have kept her down the entire time.
And I
And
mean,
so well,
those 2 points come in handy.
yeah, and that's all it was. She lost by 1 point, and it was an escape that got her, like that kept her from going to overtime. And it's like, well, I mean, you lost that one. Like that I don't know what else to tell you except you forgot what you were supposed to do, and you got mad and frustrated and weren't thinking right, and you let that girl win. Like that was one for you to have, and like I mean I just absolutely dominated, but just got so frustrated, would not listen, would could not remember any of the fundamentals, and well, that's what happens. That's what happens. You gotta. That's why you practice more. That way you don't even have to think
Mm-hmm.
about it. And
Most of them kids. I mean, I was late to the game for
mm,
wrestling. I didn't start until I was a freshman in high school. But the thing I always noticed with the kids, especially if they'd wrestled their entire lives, most of them, they were so disciplined. Even if
mm-hmm.
they knew that their chips were down, they never lost the sight of their goal. The
Yeah,
and I mean a lot of those kids, they wrestled like studs that went on to go wrestle in college. In fact,
yeah,
one of our poor kids had to wrestle a kid that this year at the NCAA finals, he finished third for in his weight
nice.
class for Nebraska. And that kid, I don't know if he even lost in college. I don't know if he even lost in high school.
Yeah,
But the kid that had him, even when his chips were down, he still fought to the bitter end. And it took me a minute to kind of, especially when I first started wrestling, it took me a minute to figure out, like, okay, you can't just nitty gritty just force them down onto their back. You actually kind of have to think this through. You have to make sure that you're doing your part. And like I
yeah,
said, it took me a year or two to really get that figured out. But once I did, I mean, my coaches noticed an immediate difference. I didn't make it to state or nothing, but they noticed an immediate difference that I was taking the game far more serious than I ever had before.
It's so crazy once you see the next level of talent too. Like one of my good buddy Teed. I mean, he's just country strong. He's about my size, but I mean, just an ox, just strong as you can get. And he got away with being strong on a lot of like riding broncs. He did he rode saddle broncs for a while, and he wasn't necessarily the best bronc rider, but he was strong enough to pull himself from the belly all the way back up to the middle. And and then I went and watched him at the state tournament one year, and and he got just ragdolled by a guy who was probably not as strong as him, but was just way better. Just like
Mm-hmm.
was thinking like three moves ahead of of Teed, and Teed was a damn good wrestler, but like I when it comes to a dog fight, I'll put Teed on there in there front of anybody. I mean, he's just dirty tough, and he's not the smartest guy other. And I say this with all the love in the world, but he's just kind of too dumb to feel pain. And and you know what I mean. And I like I say, I don't say that making fun of him. And he's just one of those guys like where you could be like, you go to the doctor, you dumbass. Like your arm
Uh-huh.
is not moving. You don't need to go anymore, and he still will. And then just see him get kind of ragdolled by some of these dudes, and you're like, oh yeah, there's a whole different level out there that we ain't
Mm-hmm.
seen yet. And
Oh yeah.
strong will only get you so far. And I was listening to a sports podcast the other day. We got the NFL draft coming up, and they were talking about how many quarterbacks from like the blue blood schools that have all the talent around them are just awesome in college but fail at the professional level. Like, when's the last time you heard of an Alabama quarterback winning the Super Bowl? Like, it just hasn't happened since Joe Namath, I don't think. And but you get guys that like Josh Allen's a good example. He went to Wyoming with nobody and was running for his life most of his college career. And that dude's that dude's gritty. He's not.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna make a lot of mistakes, but he's fun to watch, and good chance he'll win it for you.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
and so it just there's something about that adversity too that brings out the character, because there's like you're talking some of those guys that never lost in high school, and then they unless they're elite once they get to college, boy, they learn real quick. They're not as good as they thought they were.
Yeah. And and this particular kid, I mean, he grew up on a dairy farm. His cousin was one of our coaches for a little while, and
Mm,
he ended up losing a really close match that would have sent him into the finals. And he had to wrestle another four matches or something to get to the third, fourth
mm,
place match. And I mean, he wrecked house. And he would, I follow him on Instagram, and he would have something inspirational like, no matter what happens, I'm going to go out onto the mat and give it my all. And,
yeah.
and it ended up paying off for him, because last year, in his first year being able to wrestle as a, as a full-time competitor, he had finished like fourth, I think. And then he finished third this year. So to me, he's got 2 more years that he can make it to the finals or even be a two-time finals champ. And
Yeah.
he just, and that's just, the self-discipline and
Mm-hmm.
everything that he has. I mean, he comes from a wrestling family, so obviously he had a kind of maybe a step up, but still the fact that he, practices such dedication and everything. I mean, that speaks a lot of
Wrestling's a
volumes
different
for a lot
world,
of
ain't it?
people. Oh, a very different world. How many people do you
Man.
know that starve themselves on purpose just to get the shit beat
Whew.
out of them?
I cut weight when I was a senior in high school, and I didn't have to really starve myself. I was so in Colorado it went from 171 to 189, and I was
Also,
I
you
was
had
weighing
quite a
the
bit of room.
Yeah, and I was walking around at like 184, something like that. So I for the first half of the season I wrestled 189, and I was a really small 189. And then when Christmas break hit, I started cutting weight. I was like, I could, you could just tell, like, I'm not, this is not my division. And so I had to bust ass, and I got down to 171, but I didn't have to starve myself. I wrestled with a kid. I mean, he walked around during football season. He was like 140, and he dropped down to like 115. And, like that's a big cut for a not very big guy. And
Yeah,
and
that's how you
he
start to dwarf yourself.
yeah, and he honestly probably would have done better just like going up one weight class and still cut down there to it, but he wouldn't have looked so ganted up. Um, but I
And
mean,
that's what I
it's
did was wrestle up.
yeah. Well, and if you can get away with it, that's the way to go. Um, I couldn't get away with it. I was a really small 189 pounder.
I was small. I
There
was
was
small enough that I should have still been wrestling 170, and I was wrestling the 182 kids. And
mm,
I placed in more tournaments wrestling the bigger kids than I did wrestling the kids my own size. And
nice.
I don't know quite what it was. I think I just found a little niche, and my coaches really told me just to just kind of roll with it. Because
Yeah.
I mean, generally you don't think wrestling bigger kids would work out better,
No,
especially when I
usually
was as terrible as I was.
yeah, usually the extra weight doesn't help you, but there's some things though. You're probably faster than that those heavier kids too. So it's I mean there it's a give and take, but yeah, I knew for me, it was our home tournament. Me and this black kid from Amarillo, Texas. He was from the Boys Ranch school. We tied for the fastest pin. He pinned me in 14 seconds, and then I pinned another kid in 14 seconds at our home tournament. But he was so in Texas they have a 180-pound division, and he had cut weight to wrestle at 180, and then came to Colorado, and that bracket wasn't there anymore. So then he had to cut down to 171, and he was a big 171, and uh, we did a we'd wrestled like a duel or a try the night before the actual tournament, and he pinned me in like 2 minutes or something or like minute and a half, something like that. First round, and then so the next day we weighed in, and I was like, I'm just gonna shoot right off the whistle. I don't care. I'm gonna shoot and hang on to whatever I grab a hold of, and it didn't work at all. And he had me in a cradle in 14 seconds, and then we were laughing about it afterwards because we had to go up to the podium together to get our fastest pin awards, and he had pinned me, and I was like, well, I pinned that guy faster than you did, so suck it. Or just as fast, I guess. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, once we had a guy in our region that was I I think he had one loss all through high school, and that was his senior year. He'd won state at the 2A, and he went up to wrestle undefeated 3A champion, and I think he lost in overtime or something like that. It was a hell of a match, if you're a wrestling nerd. It was it was pretty cool to watch, but that was his only loss his senior year was the very last, and it was the exhibition against the 3A kid. But at that point, 2A, 3A, it doesn't matter, like you're the best of your division. Go out and beat him, see if he actually is better than you. And it's not like going
Yeah.
3A football versus 2A football. It's you're still the best of your division. It's that's what's cool about wrestling. It's all individual.
The I don't know how big of a school he came from, but he's probably one of the most well-known wrestlers. Cal Sanderson. He wrestled for
Mm,
Heber City, and
okay.
I don't think they're a I think at the time they weren't really that big of a school, like probably a 2A or a 3A or something. And that was the size of my high school was a 3A. We were just a country high school that covered, all of the ranching towns and farming towns. And
Mm.
I think he only lost twice in high school. And then he's the only undefeated four-time national champ for college. And
Yeah,
now he's
I
the and
I
now he
know I
and
know
now
Kale Sanderson.
and now he's the coach for Penn State, and Penn State's been
Yeah,
dominant over the last 15
yeah,
years.
yeah.
And
I saw something about him on Facebook the other day, and in Penn State, and that's a good school to be good at wrestling. Like Penn State's known as kind of a blue collar rough like linebacker university. They're known for being hard nosed, like just ready for a fight, and that's good for that school having him as a head coach. Like yeah, like if you're the top collegiate wrestling program, like you got some bad motherfuckers on your team,
mhm. And a lot of
like
the Penn State
tough.
kids, like if we did a camp during the summer, like we had a lot of Penn State guys that came and did
Oh really?
camps with us.
Nice.
Quentin Wright was one. He had won two of them. I can't quite remember the other kid's name. He wanted his senior year, and he ended up winning it off of the penalty point. So he felt kind of
Oh
bad because
nice.
he felt like he didn't actually earn it, is what he was kind of
Mm,
complaining about. But I mean, to me, he
yeah.
still earned it because that other guy made a mistake. That wasn't on him. That was, he ended up locking hands when he shouldn't have with four
Yeah, well
seconds left in the match.
that's a sign of a champion though, is even when you win, you're still not happy with it.
So, and yeah, we ended up having some Wyoming guys come and wrestle with us that had gone to nationals.
Nice.
We had a Cornell guy that eventually won a national championship, and I mean, I ended up really learning a lot from those guys. I really wish it would have turned into a little bit more for me, but a lot of those guys that wrestled for Penn State, they had Kel as their coach, and Kel, I don't think grew up in an area where like he had unlimited resources to make him a better wrestler. I think it was just, you know, small little town and decided,
Mm.
what, I want to be the best at what I want to be. So to me, a lot of times your school size don't mean nothing. It means
No, it
more
really don't.
of what you're, like what you think you can do.
How bad you want it. I mean, that he just wanted it more than anybody else, and that's when out. What that's one thing. A lot of people want it, but not many people go out and get it. And yeah, it's funny. I don't have a lot of regrets in life, but there's a lot of different areas where I'm just like, man, I wish I would have paid a little bit more attention or tried a little bit harder. Um, but I mean, you can't. The only thing you can do now is like, all right, well, I'm learning this today, or I'm or now my boy's 7 now, so now it's like, all right, well, I'm gonna teach him what I wish I would have known, and
Hmm.
he's already really smart, but I can make him way smarter and set him up to be just awesome once he's out on his own, and that's
Oh yeah.
I at the end of the day, that's the name of the game.
Hmm. Making yourself better than you was before.
Yep. Yeah, and then pass that on to your kids and make them better than you could ever have been. And yeah, I don't know. It's I think we make shit too complicated sometimes. Where it's there's I mean the world's tough. No doubt about it. It's hard to get through life unscathed. Actually, pretty impossible. But I don't. God never meant for us to get through unscathed. He wanted us to learn something and pass it on, and that's
Hmm.
that's what we got to do.
Oh yeah. That's why I share a lot of my memes, is to try and make the world a little bit more of a brighter place.
Well, your memes are fantastic, dude. Like I said, you're right in that Babylon B category where you can share some stuff that's just on the edge of being naughty, but still clean enough where everybody can enjoy it and they're funny. I that for me, funny is funny. I don't have many limits. As long as it makes me laugh, and yours always make me laugh. So I appreciate you, man. It's from one meme lord to another. I appreciate
Oh
you.
yeah, thank you. The
Yeah,
it all it all started by
we.
accident.
Oh, me too. I used to send those because there for a while before I started the podcast. I was kind of absent on social media. When I was a freshman in college was the first year that Facebook started, and I was pretty active until I left college. But I'd always all my buddies, if I found a good meme or something, I'd send it to them. And then when I started the podcast, we just trying to grow the Facebook audience. We started just me it was me and my cousin. We started reposting memes that we found, and then we started making our own. And it's just whatever's funny is what I try to do. And yeah, I appreciate what you do. It's gives me a little chuckle every day, and that's always needed because life can kind of suck sometimes, and
Oh yeah,
you need a little levity.
and with my range of humor ranges from pretty clean to pretty dirty. The
Yeah,
if it's too clean or too dirty, it just kind the humor's just kind of lost.
yeah,
But but when you can find one like you said that's a little edgy, I mean, I try my best to be careful because of I have a wide range of audience and
yeah.
that so I'm not necessarily trying to spare anyone's feelings, but I don't I'm just like I'm not like a super vulgar guy
Right.
and I don't want to paint that picture, but sometimes if you find a joke that's you know, kind of edgy, and it's actually funny, you have to share, you have to hit that share button.
There's nothing better than watching somebody go "Ooh," and then start laughing.
Oh
Like
yeah.
that's my favorite reaction. Like when my wife shakes her head and then starts laughing, I know I got her. I know I got her.
Sometimes my wife will be scrolling through her Facebook and she'll go, "Oh my gosh, Wyatt, this meme is so good." And then she looks to see who shared it and she sees it's me.
Uh,
And then all of a sudden it's not as funny anymore.
I know. Yeah, my wife always. She's like, I was getting ready to send you this stupid meme, and I saw that you had already posted it. Well, gotta be on your
Yeah.
game, baby. Gotta get up early to put one over this old bear.
The I mean, if I'll have people that'll tag me in a meme or something, and I kind
Mm,
of take that as a request. And so I'll
yeah.
say, like, all right, yeah, I'll share it for you, and
Oh yeah.
you've interviewed them before, but the Knight family, Jeff and Soraya,
Oh,
they
they're
have
awesome.
they absolutely love my memes, and I finally had the opportunity to meet two of their boys.
Nice.
I was walking around Smith and Edwards there in
Oh,
Ogden,
okay.
and I just happened to see Jasper and Joe, and they came over and they wanted their picture taken with me. I felt like a celebrity, and all I do
That's
is just
funny.
share memes. And
That's funny.
yeah, their family, the whole family just gets a kick out of what I share. And Jeff will
That's
tag me and
awesome.
stuff all the time and say, like, what do you think of this? And I'll say, consider it shared, and hit share. And so it's nice when you have that kind of a, I guess you could say, a following that,
Yeah.
if they think that they found something for me to share, I'll share it. I
It was
don't get
funny. We went to Reno the other night and saw Coulter Wall, and which but Coulter Wall puts on a fine show. I will say Core Blund is a far superior product. I like Coulter Wall. Don't get me wrong. I'm not talking shit. but if you're picking between Canadians, Corblund's my guy. But so it was at the casino, and they had like metal detectors and everything. It was a little big too big of a production for my liking. I like dive bars. And but anyway, we went and saw Coulter Wall. It was a good show. And when we were walking out, some kid came over to me. He's like, "Hey, are you Move Your Ass on Instagram?" I said, "Yeah, I am. I'm Matt." And he's like, "Oh, I love your stuff, man." Never once mentioned my podcast, but he loves my memes. So I was like, I'll take it as a win. But my wife just like shaking her head, and she's like, "Can't believe people like your stupid shit." Well,
that's exactly what my
off,
wife
baby.
says.
Can't turn this off.
And I should start telling her that because usually I'm just like, well, I'm sorry that I have a sense of humor.
Well, I'm sorry that I'm awesome. Yeah, it's kind of wild, but it's the beauty of social media. Is I've met some really cool people, a lot of really cool people that I've never met in person, but that like I consider friends. And then when you actually get to meet people in person, it's cool. I'd like to meet those every day on the ranch family like that. That was one of my like kind of low key one of my favorite episodes because Jeff was he had such an interesting story. You know, like I really enjoyed talking to them, and I'm gonna have to get them back on because that whole Russia deal that he was involved in, like that was just fascinating to me. Like it reminded me of like the old boom days where you just like it's a flood of people and resources going towards one thing. You know, whether it's the gold rush or the cattle boom or oh, you know that dude that up in Alaska that has the boneyard. Um, he finds all like the mammoth tusks and like the steppe bison skeletons and whatnot on his gold claim.
Oh,
He was on
that
Rogan.
sounds from okay. That sounds familiar now.
Yeah, so Rogan's had him on a couple times, but the first time, of course, Rogan's all interested in the prehistoric stuff, which is interesting. But he kept the guy, I forget his name. He kept wanting to talk about the pipeline gold rush of that Alaska pipeline and what a boondoggle I was just like I wanted to hear more about that. Now I was like I got to get that guy on my show just to talk about that. Like I'm
Yeah.
interested in all the fossils and stuff, but I there's nothing cooler than me to see just a bunch of dudes trying to make it rich, and like you get people of all different shades and flavors and characters and like the gold rush, like there was a few people that really struck it rich, but the people that really made money were the ones that are selling the whiskey and the shovels.
Mm-hmm.
And
They turned out to be the
so
real geniuses.
exactly. And so like I wanted to hear about some of those stories of because that was like one of the last great American, like gold rushes type deal was that Alaska pipeline. And I wanted to hear more about it. And I'm gonna try to get that guy on one of these days. I don't know if it'll happen, but you never know. There's been a couple people that I've been able to have on that I didn't think I'd ever have a chance to. So it's my wife calls me crazy all the time because I have no problem just talking to people, and I'm like, well, what are they gonna say? No, or they walk away? Like, well, I didn't know them anyway, so it's no skin off my back. So like, hell yeah, I'll ask Corblund to be on the podcast. I'll ask Evan Hafer from Black Rifle to be on.
Oh
What's
yeah.
the worst they're gonna do? Say no? All right,
That
well,
that was
we're
that was my philosophy for my mission was, you knock on
yeah,
someone's door, you ask if they want to talk about Jesus, and if they say no, then it's like no harm, no foul. You go on to the next
yeah,
one.
cool, man. Have a good day. That's all it is. And yeah, so I've never really had much of a hard time going up and talk to somebody that seemed like I shouldn't be talking to them. I was like, I don't know, I just people are people.
Oh
And
yeah.
so yeah, there's some people are a little harder to get in contact with than others, but I don't know, like Core Blonde, I saw him at the Star in Elko and went up and introduced myself, asked him to be on the podcast, and he gave me his phone number. And a couple weeks later, I interviewed him, and it was all right. That was easy enough.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, but my wife was like, I would have never went and talked to him. I was like, why not? I said, what's the worst he gonna do? Turn away? Tell you to go away? I mean, that's like the absolute worst. And so yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those things. Just you never know until you try.
Yeah. We had a cowboy rendezvous over in Logan. That's just, a half
Mm-hmm.
hour away from our place. And they're at the Cache County Fairgrounds, and they had, you know, a couple of different famous cowboy poets there. Like they had that Wiley from the Wiley Wild
Oh
West.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
I can't remember his last name, but he was there. They had Ned Ledoux there a few days before, and well, we're friends with one of the bands, Saddle Strings. I don't know if you're familiar with them or not.
I know of him. Yeah.
And we were just talking to some of them, and we were talking about the Dave Stamey concert, and all of
Mm-hmm.
a sudden, Dave Stamey, it's almost as if he heard his name, and he walked right on over, and
He's a cool
and we
guy. I like
and and we
Dave.
and we talked, and I got to talk with him for probably a solid 10-15 minutes, and
Yeah.
on the inside, I'm like fangirl freaking out, like I felt like a Swiftie at a concert. And but on the outside, I'm trying to make it seem like I'm not a psychopath. And
Yeah.
yeah, he's just so fun to talk to. And then of course I would rather go listen to him than listen to 99% of what's on the radio.
Oh, Dave Stamey's a showman. I really enjoyed his show that we saw him in Elko in it was like right before the pandemic. And I talked to him last year for probably 10, 15 minutes or something, but they were trying to get out of town there was a storm blowing in, and he was headed back to California. But super nice guy. And then I got to visit with him for about an hour on the podcast, and yeah, just a really cool guy. And I'm really fascinated by it because I didn't know anything about him until I started the show, because I grew up in eastern Colorado, and like we knew some of the Texas artists, like I knew Red Steagall and a few others, Michael Martin Murphy, but all like the West Coast stuff, the Great Basin, like it was pretty foreign to me. And then I got introduced to Dave Stamey. I was like, I like this guy. He's a hell of a songwriter. And I'm a history nerd too, and he sings a lot of like historical type songs. That's why I like Corb a lot. And so like he's a good like just trotting out or riding pins type of artist, because like you get to thinking about some. He has that one song is like Montana Homestead, like 1893 or something like that. I'll listen to that on repeat and just try to imagine what it was like trying to just breaking ground for you're trying to get a cabin built before the winter sets in July in Montana, and
Oh yeah.
and then it just I don't know, just trying to put yourself in those shoes and realize how good we have it nowadays.
Oh yeah. Nothing like
It's
listening to an old song like that to make you appreciate what you have now.
yeah, it's pretty wild, but I'm kind of, I wouldn't say I'm worried about the world, but I'm kind of nervous nowadays. But uh got a pretty good community around me. I know it'll be like it's probably gonna suck if everything goes to hell, but I'll probably be okay. Not that it's gonna be fun, but I'll probably be okay. And I think most rural people are kind of in that same boat. And but it also makes you realize you can't. It's also not a great thing to be a complete hermit. You know, you do as much as you like to think I can do all this on my own, and that may be true, but it's a lot easier if you got good company around you.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's I guess long story short, or to wrap it all up, it's you know, you seem like really good people, and that gives me hope for the world. Is there's good people out there, and like I said, Jesus is my faith, but good people is my religion. You know, I don't really care what the religion people subscribe to. I just like good people, and you know, it's and Wyatt, you seem like good people, and I appreciate the hell out of your memes.
And I mean, I share a lot of the stuff you make, so I mean,
Well, I appreciate it.
that goes to show you have quality stuff.
Well, I appreciate it, man, but I know you got a project to work on. We've been at it a little over 2 hours, so probably better let you go.
Yeah, I got a little bit of time left to work on an assignment, so
There you
get the
go.
good old homework. So, but
Well, that degree will help you in the long run. It's I wouldn't say that college stuff is for everybody, but it is. It's not if you're going in the right major. It's not a wasted effort. Some of it is, but I think it seems
yeah.
like you're doing it the right way. Like I said, I wish I would have started college at like 25 instead of 18. I would have got more out of it, but you live and you learn.
Oh yeah, that's uh that's something that I wish some of the college professors would do. They'd live and learn rather than just learn and
Oh
tell me what to
man,
do.
there's nothing worse than a college professor who's never left campus. Oof.
Yeah.
They're
So,
smart as hell, but they don't know how the world works.
hmm and I
But
guess before we go, we can't end the show without telling some sort of dick joke.
oh yeah, we haven't had a dick joke yet, have we? That's
Yeah. I know you said that you'd kind of try to be a little bit more tame for the people that for my people that would want to listen, but if anyone who knows me that's going to listen knows that I appreciate a good dick joke.
I'm a connoisseur of dick jokes. I'm promise I'm not gay by any means, but the male penis is probably the funniest thing ever.
It is the
It's
funniest
just
thing
really
ever.
it's really funny. Mostly because we're so proud of it. Um, but
Hmm.
that's I don't know. Humor is the spice of life, and ah, we were discussing on the last podcast on my Fence Post Politics show with my college buddies, and this happened in Fort Collins where I went to school. There was a guy that got arrested for a litany of different felonies. He worked at a Safeway, and he was he was stroking the old eggplant all over other eggplants and various fruits and produce, and there was there was a lot going on in that story. But it was, you know, Fort Collins hasn't made me very proud in a long time. I don't know if this one did it, but at least gave me a good laugh. Part of me was like, "Oh, come on, just let the guy have his fun." And then you find out he was also tainting some produce, and you're like, "Ah, lock that guy up and throw away the key." that's
Yeah.
that's out of hand, out of hand. He had one in his hand, but that was out of hand. There we go. There's our
Yeah.
dick joke for that. It was yeah, it was rough.
Oh yeah.
Did not make me proud of old Colorado State University, but I will say he was not a native Coloradan. He was a California transplant, so at least
That
there's
that
that.
yeah. I was gonna say if there's gonna be a consolation, at least he's from the land of morons.
For a sticky subject, that was a soft landing. Hey, Well, go follow Wyatt King on Facebook. You'll laugh your ass off. He's one of my favorites on the social medias. Really, for the most part, good, wholesome, funny jokes. He'll throw a spicy one in there from time to time. But Wyatt, I really appreciate having you on the show. It's been a lot of fun.
It has been a lot of fun. I hope we can do it again sometime.
You're welcome back anytime, amigo.
All righty. I'll let you get back to it, and hopefully I can do good enough on my assignment. My grades are not looking as nice as they was at the beginning of the semester. I got to get them back up.
Well, I don't know what branch, what flavor of Mormonism is, but if you do too bad, you'll be searching for another wife, or if you'll do too good, you'll be searching for an extra wife. So, anyways, good luck on your good luck on your assignment. Take care, and thanks everybody for tuning in. Now move your ass. We're burning daylight.
Your eyes up in the morning, beneath the stars so bright. Pull your hat down, make sure your cinch is tight. Horses kinda snuffy, cold chill up your spine. We'll get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight. Burning daylight. Burning daylight. In the saddle till the job's done right. Just together, and you won't catch 'em all. But when you ride through the gate, make sure you sit up tall. I can see the horizon, it's looking pretty bright. Well, get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight. Burning daylight. Burning daylight. In the saddle till the job's done right.